Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this the Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And if you would like to keep up with all things Clown Decade, obviously do subscribe to the channel and do become a channel member. It's only £2 a month minimum and it really does help out the channel. Anyway, today we are going to be looking at what's been all over the news and what is frankly, in my mind actually, a massive gift to Labour. Because for all stories to get hung up on in the news, this one is probably their least worst, and honestly, probably why they're quite happy about it, because everything to do with the economy, everything to do with the legal migrants, everything to do with basically how Labour's running the country is just dire, just awful. And so having this story of Angela Rayner spending north of £700,000 on a third home while recently pushing through a tax change, that's a pretty good story, probably wouldn't last a week. Unfortunately, the Times also reported this. Tories have accused Angela Rayner of hypocrisy over second home tax. Council tax on Deputy PM's Grace and Favour home, now her third residence, is covered by the taxpayer. Oh, hang on, no, this isn't even the main brunt of the story. Wow, there's a lot to this. Okay, apparently her council tax is covered by the taxpayer, I guess because it's technically an expense, even though it's a holiday home. The home is in Hove, and her constituency is over in Ashdam. For those of you that aren't up to date with UK geography, that's in Manchester, in the northwest. Hove is in the southeast, literally 200 miles away from each other. Anyway, I'm now going to have to find an article with the actual main story here. Angela Rayner faces questions over alleged inheritance tax dodge. The Deputy Prime Minister's Ashton-under-Lyne home was valued at £650,000, exactly the maximum amount to qualify for an exemption when shares were placed in trust. Oh, hang on, this still isn't the story that I'm after. Wow, she's dodging a lot of tax recently. Here it is, here's the big one. Tax advisors cast doubt on Angela Rayner's housing arrangements. The Deputy Prime Minister put a constituency home in a trust for her children, which means she was still considered an owner for stamp duty purposes. What the hell does that mean? Well, further questions were raised over Angela Rayner's property arrangements as tax experts cast doubt on whether she should have been entitled to a £40,000 reduction in stamp duty, which is effectively a tax for buying a home after your first one. You are completely exempt from it from when you buy your first home. Obviously, this was her third, so, well, she's exempt from it. And this isn't the first time Angela Rayner's got into a bit of hot water over tax arrangements when it comes to buying and selling property. When she right to bide her original council house, her old family home, which she never thanked Margaret Thatcher for, there were questions over whether selling that home should have come under capital gains tax because of obviously how much more money she will have gained after buying the property and then selling it, because you buy it at a discounted rate with the right to buy scheme. Anyway, she was referred to HMRC at the start of this government, and they basically said, oh, no, she didn't do anything wrong, which a lot of people saw as, oh, that's HMRC protecting her, but, well, she didn't do anything legally wrong there. And there's actually nothing legally wrong she's done here. It's just blatant hypocrisy. So the Deputy PM was accused of dodging the higher rate of stamp duty applied to second homes by declaring that the flat she bought earlier this summer in Hove, East Sussex, was the only one she owned. And 2 months earlier, she forfeited her stake in her constituency home in Ashton-under-Lyne, which she bought in 2016 with her former husband. In 2023, the couple split the ownership with a trust administered by the law firm Shoesmiths Trust Corporation, which is understood they did so to place some of the house equity in a trust for their children. Downing Street claimed that the court order prevented Rayner from giving a full explanation of her property arrangements, and Sir Keir Starmer defended her as a great British success story, which, honestly, I really do not like Angela Rayner, and her only talent seems to be the attack dog for Labour, which is where all these hypocrisy accusations come from, and why an awful lot of people, even on the Labour side, are asking for her to be sacked, or at least resign. But I'm fully in the mindset that that's not going to happen. Labour are going to be loving this distraction, as I say, because out of all stories that are out there at the moment, this is the least politically damaging, and keeping her only distracts it more. Honestly, I would really have a light touch on this and complain about the fact that the gilt yields are higher than ever, higher than when Liz Truss was in charge of the economy and when she apparently broke it. Borrowing is pretty much 100% of GDP, it's probably gone over it by now. We have literally no money. There's so many stories about the wider economy that matter. This, to me, is just a distraction, and the Tories are morons because, really, Kemi Badenoch was trying to do that in PMQs. That's what she was trying to focus on. And everyone was saying, oh, but you've got an open goal with Angela Rayner. Yeah, but let's be real, it's a distraction, isn't it? And honestly, the normie view on this is pretty much that. I care way more about the economy than Angela Rayner being a bit of a hypocrite. Yeah, alright, say she should be sacked for hypocrisy, but realistically I care a hell of a lot more about the national debt rising forever than the petty character assassinations of politics. Very much feels like a Westminster bubble story, this, shockingly. Yeah, we get it. Politicians dodge tax and are hypocrites. We kind of all know that. And I suppose this is where my video is going to differentiate from a lot of other people's. Angela Rayner, really, in reaction to this, has kind of done the right thing. She's heard the criticisms, referred herself to the ethics watchdog, and has put herself up for investigation on this issue. It's now in the proper channels as far as I'm and a lot of other people are concerned, and if it does turn out that she has done wrong, done something illegal, or done something that brings shame to Parliament or the Labour Party, then yes, I will be a lot more firm in my calls for her to resign, but for now, I think she's actually an asset to the right because I think she actually puts more people off than people who actually like her. She's effectively Labour's version of Zach Polanski, except Angela Rayner isn't as mad, or at least hides her mad opinions a lot better than him. Plus, frankly, she's just like Marmite. Labour supporters absolutely seem to love her, people who hate the Tories seem to love her, but everyone else seems to hate her. There's no one who's really got a middling opinion on Angela Rayner, and that's an asset more than it isn't. But I suppose another big issue with this is that obviously Angela Rayner is a housing minister, and as we read before, she is happy to up taxes on people buying second, third homes, etc., and this at the very least should be her, well, it's technically her third home, but I think legally it was only a second, and that's why the stamp duty was cut by 40,000 or something like that. It's all very confusing and things that most people don't think about because most people struggle to buy one home, let alone two. Anyway, the summary of this story is that the Rayner row revolves around three properties. One is the home she owned with her ex-husband in a constituency of Ashdam-under-Lyne. The second is the Grace and Favour flat in the Admiralty House, London, which she enjoys access to because of her job, because she's Housing Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister. And the third is the newly purchased £800,000 flat in Hove. Rayner's name apparently remains on the deeds in Ashdam-under-Lyne home in some form. It has separately been reported that by declaring the constituency property her primary residence for council tax, Rayner does not have to pay the full rate of council tax of the Admiralty House flat in Westminster, which was a story I picked up on before. But Rayner told Brighton and Hove Council that a new flat there was her second home for council tax purposes, and she declared it was the only one she owned, not a second home, when she paid stamp duty on the purchase. So this is where the issue comes in. How can it be your only home if your primary residence obviously is in your constituency over in Ashdam? Because due to the way council tax works, it is charged to the resident, not the person who owns the house. When you are renting, you pay the council tax, not the landlord. But she didn't rent that property, she owned it. Hence she has a share in the trust that her and her ex-husband brought about for the benefit of her children, which, by the way, is another way to tax dodge, by the way, to avoid inheritance tax. But that's by the by. Everyone tax dodges. I really don't care about that. And the thing with all this is that it's all actually legal. It's just raised questions about, well, why your housing secretary upping tax on everything, and in the past you said dodging taxes effectively kills people because of austerity, and yet you're doing the exact same thing. It's the whole hypocrisy argument, which again, everyone knows politicians are hypocrites. Everyone knows politicians dodge taxes. Yet people didn't like the sleaze that politicians have, but they are all very much used to it, unfortunately. And I don't know many people that were seriously expecting Labour to be that different, especially when the first thing that was all over the news was all the gifts that they got, and that they didn't realise optically made them look corrupt, and just writing it down and declaring that you've had this gift to Parliament doesn't make it any better. Very much proceduralist. If I follow the procedure, that means it's okay. No, your morals have to be a bit independent of that, I'm afraid, and it appears that nobody in Labour actually has any personal morals, and it's just, oh well, follow the law and I've done everything right. No, Angela, people are not happy about this, but as I say, her reaction to all this has been pretty much all you can expect, so I'm not massively calling for her to be sacked or resigned. I want to see the outcome first. Anyway, this was a massive story, obviously, because for some reason, politicians dodging tax is news, politicians being hypocrites is news, whatever. Anyway, she did an interview, Angela Rayner that is, over on Sky News with Beth Rigby, which again is something that I can't complain about. I think that is a good reaction to this story, to effectively face the music. I can't really be mad at Angela Rayner as a result of this story, to be quite honest with you. If it turns out that the ethics watchdog has found that she's been unethical, that's a different story, but that's under investigation as of now. For now, though, the reaction to all this, pretty ethical.
Yeah, first of all, Beth, it's been quite a distressing time for my family. I have a court order that was in place around confidentiality regarding my son, my family and my divorce proceedings that happened in 2023, and therefore wasn't able to give a full account of the circumstances of our complex living arrangements.
This is the reason it's legal, by the way. Assuming that's all true, and assuming the tax advice that Angela Rayner has got was accurate to the information that she could legally give, technically she's done nothing wrong. And as we went through with all the other stories, there's plenty of other taxes that she has dodged or alleged to have dodged. This is all while saying that people should pay more tax and things like that. It's the hypocrisy of it that is the actual issue here. But if all that's true and she was just following tax advice that was the best that she could get with the information she was legally able to give, realistically she's actually done nothing wrong. Again, that's a big if though, and she is willing to be investigated for it. I think she'll be okay. And I think all these calls for her being sacked or for her to resign, I think they're jumping the gun a bit. I think we all need to slow down, and to be honest, I think we just need to stop getting distracted from the fact that Rachel Reeves is destroying the economy and the budget in November is going to be devastating.
That order was lifted last night. I applied to have that order lifted so that I could give people the information. In 2020, my son had an award, and a trust was set up by the court to deal with his finances as part of that award. That trust was set up, and they decided that they would take on the property so that me and my husband could have a nesting arrangement where we could provide for my child in our family home, which is our family home and remains our family home.
So yes, yet again, technically she does not own the home because the home is now owned by a trust, but they still live in it, and it is still her primary residence for, well, council tax purposes, and because, well, that's where her constituency is. All makes sense. It's important to go through the detail of this because I think a lot of people just hear, oh, she dodged tax, and leave it at that. No, the story is way more complicated than that, and is, well, part of the reason that I want to avoid divorce like the plague, because it just sounds horrible for everyone involved. And I do feel bad for anyone going through that. However, my sympathy for Angela Rayner only goes so far because she has effectively been the Labour attack dog for, well, decades at this point, and she is absolutely the type of woman that has been absolutely no mercy for my enemies. So sorry, my sympathy only goes so far, but I'm going to be realistic and politically savvy here and say I'd rather she stuck about rather than get sacked, because ultimately I think she's nothing but a detriment to Labour at this point, and I think her popularity has definitely waned over these stories. God isn't being in opposition so much easier. Anyway, she is asked about her position in Parliament, and, well, to be honest with you, she looks like she's about to break down.
Even though you've explained it, do you think it's sustainable? Do you think you can carry on as particularly Housing Minister?
Well, I made a mistake based upon the advice that I relied upon, that I received at the time, and a leading expert has now said that advice was wrong. I think hopefully most people can see if you rely on advice given to you by lawyers and you follow that process, and then you find out that that process is wrong and that advice was wrong, I'm rectifying it at the earliest opportunity.
She's not wrong there, to be honest, but she does sound quite close to tears because I think she realises that there's going to be an awful lot of pressure to get her sacked. I think she'll survive, and I think the main reason she'll survive is because, as I said earlier, out of all stories coming out about Labour recently, this is by far the least worst, and it is distracting everyone, including this channel, which, as I will remind everyone, the economy's breaking down like crazy. And to be honest with you, there are quite a lot of people coming out in defence of Angela Rayner, which is perfectly expected. Beth Rigby's own personal analysis on Twitter of this was, I interviewed Angela Rayner a number of times and she's always robust. very different side of her today, and she was clearly very upset about having to disclose details about her kids. I asked her if she thought about quitting to avoid that, and she said her family wanted her to speak up. Fairly neutral to the more sympathetic side of things, and she's not wrong. Angela Rayner certainly was a different Angela Rayner there, but as I say, my sympathy is very limited for her, given the way she has acted in the past. We'll get into more of that later, but I really want to cover this first. Rayner used disabled son's NHS compensation to buy second home. The Deputy Prime Minister sold a share of her Ashdam house to Charles Trust for £162,500. I need to go into this because it sounds like the Rayner family sued the NHS because the NHS is terrible and probably didn't treat her son very well, and so they got a payoff out of it, and it's managed to get her a second home, third home technically, that millions of people in the United Kingdom could only dream of. And again, the idea that Rayner is a great British success story is crazy. She dropped out of school at 16 because she got pregnant. She then basically, she worked as a carer, to be fair. I'm not going to, that's probably the least objectionable thing about her life, to be honest. Because then she became a trade union representative, climbed the greasy pole there. Obviously doing that gets you into the Labour Party, and it was basically just a free ride up the greasy pole, and now she's second to the top, and a lot of people wanted her as Prime Minister. It's actually hard to say whether people still want her as Prime Minister or not. I think things in Labour are going to go so badly that, honestly, her actual best personal move is probably to actually quietly go to the back benches, wait it out for a decade, hope reform absolutely ruin their own chances of getting elected again when they do get in, which I think is unlikely, but as I say, I think this is her best chance, and then try and climb the greasy pole again to become Prime Minister in 2040, something like that. Because honestly, the stories coming out about her this week, they're not sustainable by any stretch of the imagination, but as I say, probably the least worst stories about Labour at the moment. So Rayner used a whole bunch of money from a trust set up to care for a disabled son to buy the £800,000 seafront flat in the centre of a sleaze inquiry. The Deputy Prime Minister sold a 25% share of her house in Ashdam to the Trust for £162,500. She said on Wednesday that her son, who was born prematurely, had received an award in 2020 and that a trust was set up to look after his interest. The Telegraph understands that the payout followed an 11-year legal battle waged between Rayner's and the hospital where her son was born. Sources suggest the NHS had paid compensation following difficulties during his birth and subsequent care in 2008. Final payments can take years to be made because of the lengthy process for assessing long-term damage. Don't get me wrong, I feel bad for a disabled son, but once again, this is the sort of thing that Labour are usually against. Don't sue the NHS, it's a waste of money and takes money away from care of people. And instead, Rayner gets a healthy payout for her family. It just seems a bit mad. I am perfectly fine with suing the NHS, by the way. It's just I would have thought that Labour supporters wouldn't be. And then using that to help buy a third house, yeah, it's all a bit sleazy. It's all a bit, this is what you were complaining about the Tory party for. This isn't good. Anyway, as mentioned before, the big part of this hypocrisy is all of Angela Rayner's old tweets and social media videos. Back in 2023, Nadhim Zwari's story about his tax affairs don't add up. After months of denials, the truth emerges. His position is untenable. Sunak should dismiss him from the cabinet. Yes, well, it's a shame when these words come back to bite you, isn't it, Miss Rayner? Again, I completely understand why people want her sacked. I just think it's very short-sighted. Let her be a distraction for now, and then when all the stories of how badly Labour are doing come out all at once, it's going to be way more damaging. She's basically only popular with Labour's core supporters anyway. Whether she stays or goes honestly probably won't affect the Labour Party too much, to be honest with you. And even though I think Angela Rayner going to the ethics watchdog is perfectly fine for her to do, 2023 yet again, Rayner made it very clear that Sunak shouldn't need the ethics watchdog to investigate Swahi's tax affairs, and instead he should just sack him. Well, once again, probably not the best words to come back to bite you. Again, I can very much understand why people want her sacked. I, however, don't think you necessarily need to act like your enemies. But as mentioned before, when it comes to the political side of things, basically everyone in Labour is defending Angela Rayner.
In relation to the Deputy Prime Minister, she has explained her personal circumstances in detail. Absolutely. She's gone over and above in setting out the details, including Mr. Speaker, yesterday afternoon, asking a court to lift a confidentiality order in relation to her own son. I know from speaking at length to the Deputy Prime Minister just how difficult that decision was for her and her family. But she did it to ensure that all information is in the public domain. She has now referred herself to the independent advisor. That is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I don't think she's going anywhere, and to be honest with you, not an awful lot of what he says is wrong there. That is the right way to defend Angela Rayner as far as I'm concerned. Is she a hypocrite? Yeah, a massive one, but we already knew that. Getting bad tax advice I don't think should cause you to be sacked. Being a massive hypocrite I don't think should cause you to be sacked, because all politicians fall into both these traps. And at the moment, realistically, whoever's going to replace Rayner is going to be worse anyway. So keep this machine running and, for God's sake, limit the damage this Labour government's going to do. I think we have the best of a bad bunch here. Anyway, there are other people who are defending Rayner who, for some reason, still seem to think it's 2014.
Well, I think even a joke he mentioned, a jail just doesn't work really, because she isn't going to jail. This isn't a criminal offence. She's made a mistake, which she has apologised for. She is going to correct it. She said she's going to pay it. I don't know what the quality of advice was that her solicitor gave her, but most of us, when we buy a house, we get a conveyancing lawyer, we ask them what we owe, they tell us, we pay it. That's what happens.
So this is Thangam Debonair, who ended up losing her seat to the Greens somewhere around Bristol, I can't remember where exactly, and is now in the cabinet because she was just given a peerage and is put in the House of Lords. I'm going to be honest with you, I think that's a great system to have and is a very unique part of our constitution. I don't see why you shouldn't be able to put someone in to the House of Lords you think would be very useful as a minister. It's the fact that they can be there forever that I think is a bit of a problem. Anyway, none of that's the issue. It's what she ends up with here.
In my view, the sexism and classism that's been thrown at Angela, not just by the Telegraph, but by Tory politicians, is hypocritical in the extreme, ill-deserved, and just basically shows them up, because this is a woman with talent and charisma coming out of her fingers.
I don't think Angela Rayner's that talented, to be honest, but anyway. Yes, sexism, classism, Tory hypocrisy. Sorry, I would not be using the hypocrisy word in this instance. Angela Rayner is very much on the side of the hypocrite here, as we have already gone through. I mean, that was just a taster of things she said in the past about dodging tax and being sacked as a minister. But then to try and use the the working class and woman card, it's cringe almost in 2025. People are so fed up of it. Anyway, Kemi Badenoch very much on her attack dog streak, saying she should absolutely be sacked for this. If Starmer had a backbone, he'd sack her immediately. She has to go. Again, bit short-sighted, I think, and this was the only part of PMQs where she actually did focus on this attack. And people are upset that this was the only part of her script where she did attack Angela Rayner. I don't think it's that bad. Again, there's way bigger issues at the moment than one politician dodging tax and remaining as Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Minister. We know they're all bad. We know they're all hypocrites. I don't think as a Tory either it's a particularly effective attack given the skeletons in their closet when it comes to the exact same thing. Try and, rise above it. Which actually Kemi Badenoch largely did after that. Unfortunately, because of the criticism she got that she didn't attack Starmer enough on this point, she then had to come out with a social media video after PMQs.
Why is Angela Rayner still in her job? And what's happened to Keir Starmer? Does he still stand by his own words that tax evasion should be prosecuted like any other fraud? Labour have a lot of questions to answer. Labour voted again to increase taxes. Angela Rayner admits dodging hers. We don't want hypocrites running our tax policy.
Man, the Tory attention span's really gone to shot if that's the way they're editing their social media videos. There was no room to breathe there. But yeah, is this really the best attack you have? Calling Tories hypocrites for decades didn't work. Why do you think it would work back with Labour? I just think it's such a lame attack line. Wait until the watchdog has concluded, and if it turns out she did wrong, then go for the kill. You're doing it too early. You're jumping the gun. And a lot of Tory MPs seem to be on the side of, oh no, go harder on this. They're doomed. Of course they're doomed. Reform, oddly enough, have actually done well in having a bit of a go at her, but not too much of a go, effectively saying, oh, well, there's a lot of confusion here, hopefully Angela Rayner can clear that up. And she has cleared it up, and, well, we'll get into it, but unfortunately I think they are making a bit of a mistake by jumping on the bandwagon as well, but I guess it's politics and it'll be part of the bubble. What can you do? However, I think there's another side to the coin to this, which is that you can be too sympathetic to Angela Rayner. Miriam Cates wrote, Angela Rayner has complex living arrangements as a result of her divorce and her son's disability. She took professional financial advice that a lawyer has now said was wrong. She is taking action to rectify the situation. Rayner should not be hounded out of office. I think it would be better off for politicians or ex-politicians to just not say anything rather than this, to be honest with you. Although my sentiment is largely the same here, I do also think it's a rather large mistake for Tories to give her too much leeway on this. Mention she's a hypocrite, mention she shouldn't have dodged tax, don't mention any of the defences for her. That is what I would say Tory line should be, which is pretty much what Kemi Badenoch did. But then she was criticised for it and so is overcompensating the other way. I suppose in Miriam Cates' defence, she isn't actually an MP at the moment. She works for GB News as a journalist. So I suppose I can cut her a little slack on this. Anyway, Ed Davey is very much part of the fake opposition Lib Dems, who are basically just Labour for the middle class. Lib Dem leader Ed Davey, who also has a disabled son, responds to Angela Rayner's stamp duty underpayment. I understand it's normally the role of opposition leaders to jump up and down and call for resignations, as we've seen plenty of Conservatives do already. Obviously, if the ethics advisor says Angela Rayner has broken the rules, her position may well become untenable. But as a parent of a disabled child, I know the thing my wife and I worry about is our son's care after we have gone. So I can completely understand the trust that Deputy Prime Minister was thinking about the same thing here. Perhaps now is a good time to talk about how we look after disabled people and how we can build a more caring country. What is this deflection? It just goes to show that Lib Dems really do not see Labour as any sort of competition. Lib Dems have their positions in rural, not necessarily rural, but suburban, middle-class areas of Britain, and they absolutely storm them all the time because it's the type of people who are Ramonas, but also know that Labour are full of communists, and don't seem to realise that the Lib Dems are full of communists now instead, as the Tories are too to some extent. But trying to deflect like this, it just shows that the Lib Dems are just not a serious party, but I think everyone's come to agree to that now. They might be in opposition next time, though, so they better step up their game. He obviously doubled down on this, and when the Conservatives were once again demanding that Angela Rayner, after admitting tax evasion, which is perfectly legal, should be sacked, Ed Davey said, let's see what the ethics advisor says, but maybe instead of all this jumping up and down, it would be a good time to discuss how we look after disabled children and build a more caring country. Very much just playing to the old Lib Dem base of, I'm a bleeding heart liberal and make too much money. That's basically it. Anyway, finally, as mentioned before, Richard Tice said she called for others to resign over tax errors. She admits her own tax errors while Deputy Prime Minister. If she had integrity, she'll resign, and if not, if Starmer had integrity, he must sack hypocrite Rayner. Again, I think it's pointless calling for resignations at this point. Oddly enough, Ed Davey is kind of right that you should wait for the ethics watchdog to conclude. Honestly, they'll probably find that she didn't do anything wrong and say, make sure you get better tax advice next time. And that's when you go for the kill, but, say calling hypocrisy, fine, it's one tweet from Richard Tice. It's not like he's overcompensating like Kemi Badenoch. Basically, from now on, I expect them just to answer questions about Rayner like this whenever there's a press conference, which, yep, fine. Tories seem to be largely going on the attack, and I think it's because they want revenge. They're not going to get it because, frankly, it didn't really work when Labour called them out on the exact same thing either, because it's all perfectly legal. Right, that'll do it for today, I think. Once again, thank you very much for watching. In terms of what you can do to help out the channel, leave a like, a comment, and subscribe, of course. You can also become a channel member, or leave super chats, super thanks. Great ways to help out the channel. As for shilling, tonight there's some Hollow Knight, Saturday there's Laughing at the Guardian, and videos out as and when I can make them. Right, with that is everything I had for you today. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.